Scott Engel for the Fantasy Sports Network today in here in Lower Manhattan, where Judge Manuel Mendez chose to reserve his decision on whether to let DraftKings and FanDuel continue to operate in New York State, while the Attorney General's office sought a preliminary injunction to get them to cease from operating for now. He said he was going to look at the matter in discovery. To give you a better picture of what happened here at 71 Thomas Street today, the Attorney General's office started out with his own arguments, basically comparing fantasy sports to sort of pools and other types of gaming. They also claim that fantasy players don't have control of events when there's weather involved, whether there's a fumble or items like that are random and beyond their control. The lawyers from DraftKings and FanDuel went on to prove that these DFS fantasy players are not engaging in a game where they are reliant on the outcome of a single event, but rather they are influencing the control of their own fantasy contests. And then they went out to point out the flaws in the Attorney General's reasoning that daily fantasy sports and seasonal fantasy sports were different games. And after the proceedings, we spoke to the lawyers representing DraftKings and FanDuel. Some very spirited arguments from you about how the Attorney General's office was very flawed in presenting the difference between seasonal and daily fantasy sports.
Yes, that's an admission made by the Attorney General that's fatal to the Attorney General's case. The fact of the matter is the Attorney General concedes that seasonal fantasy sports games are perfectly legal.
We had expert affidavits from three very, very prominent statisticians and econometric professors that demonstrated that this had to be a contest of skill, because you could not have gotten the results that people get if you weren't using skill as the determinative characteristic of an outcome. In fact, one of them testified that in order to get the results that you get entirely by chance, the chances of doing that would be 1 out of a centrillion.
Well, our position is that the way to think about fantasy sports is to recognize that in all sports there are participants in the event who don't influence the outcome. The outcome is a function of a tremendous number of variables. But in the particular context of the separate fantasy sports contest, the participant is an important influence on the outcome because he's picking the roster, and that has significant effect on who ends up performing where and how that roster comes out compared to the rosters of the other people with whom he's competing.
So very strong arguments from the daily fantasy gaming sides, who felt they really backed up their positions with strong evidence, while they felt the Attorney General's side did not back themselves up so well. So now it's in the hands of Judge Mendez, and we'll see where this goes from here as he looks at this matter, as he said, in discovery. Reporting for the Fantasy Sports Network from Lower Manhattan, I'm Scott Engel.